Good evening. Do you believe in ghosts?
It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive. Oh, in the name of God.
Yeah. Dracula. Here occurred the frightening and shocking history of Prince Dracula and the woman he loved.
She kidnapped young girls and kept them chained to give blood for her to bathe in and drink. She bit them everywhere.
No.
And then she pushed white-hot pokers into their faces. And when they parted their lips to scream, she shot the flaming rod.
He is unlike any man. What are you?
I have crossed oceans of time to find you.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon,
we're going to be talking more vampires, but this time in leather jackets. So join the sleaze.
we decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for the 3 years, soon to be approaching 4 years at some point, which will be crazy. There's something like 90 to maybe even 100 bonus episodes waiting for you, as well as our bonus transmission series where we talk about new release genre films, which there are a lot coming out, and you can expect a lot of big ones that we're going to be talking about this month alone. What do we got? We got Halloween Kills, we got Dune, we got Bond that we're going to see the weekend that you guys are listening to this. So
crazy, man.
That interests you at all, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we have a lot of patrons to thank this week, a lot, and I'm going to have to rip through them, unfortunately, kind of fast because there are a lot of you. So thanks so much to Flower, Kelpole B, Pat O'Brien, Hawkind Quail, Andrew M., Artyom Topolin. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Habubullah Khan, Azakia Bates, Joshua Goolsby. I'm going to have to let Jamie give a shot at this at some point. Spencer Wilkie, the Magic Bang Bus.
Happy to have you on.
Thank you. Frank, Tim O'Connor, Adam Mosher, Stephanie Monahan, Ophir Bernstein, Cameron Rogers, Adam Hubsher, who upgraded from $5 to $10 a month and is going to be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings. Thanks to you, Adam. Robbie Claraval, Beef 209. We're still going here. Chris McDonald, Joe Pristiani, Ben McDonald, Sid Beretta, Failed Exam. Hope that's what you were doing. Matthew, Brian E. Torgeson, Oscar Franco, Christian GC. I didn't realize how crazy of a month it was. Cooper Blask, Uberlin Gizbar. That was brutal too. John Hayes, and that's everyone.
Awesome.
Huge.
Wow.
I think we had a little bit of a break between recording, so that might be 2 or 3 weeks worth of names. But still, thanks so much for everyone signing up. I hope you guys are enjoying those bonus episodes.
Yes.
The other plug for the week, as always, is Apple Podcasts. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts, and I see the stats, I know that you are. Give us a good old rating and review down at the bottom after you scroll down there. It helps us climb the ranks at iTunes and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you guys like the poster art that local horror artist Trevor Henderson did for the show for us, you can get that basically put on anything you want. A shirt, a mug, a hoodie, a notebook, a pillow. We've had people buy a little bit of everything. You can just get a poster if that's what you want. Jamie and I have one.
Oh, yeah.
You can find that link in the description of this episode or over at sleazoidspodcast.com if that interests you at all. And that's it. Mouthful. Intro is done. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks would have heard from us free listeners. We would have had special guest Stephen Sadak from the We Hate Movies podcast on the show, and we would have been talking, one, cat people. not the 1940s film, the 1980s film remake by Paul Schrader, which is very gross and erotic and features some crazy sequences of people turning into cats and tearing bodies to shreds and ripping arms off, and Paul Schrader falling in love with Miss Kinski on screen and being denied her love very brutally.
Yeah. Or Paul.
We paired that with another sort of underrated 80s kind of sci-fi under-the-skin genre hybrid action film, The Hidden, from 1987. Which was really, really crazy. And if you are interested at all in Kyle MacLachlan playing a very alien-like FBI agent predating Twin Peaks, The Hidden is the way to go. We had a lot of fun talking with Steven about those films. And then last week, we kicked off the very first episode of Spooktober 2021. Listeners of the show for many years will know that in October, we do nothing but talk about horror films for the entire month. And we kicked it off in a fashion we typically like to do, where we talked about some Italian horror. We went back to the early Giallo films, the actual earliest Giallo films that we could basically find. We did Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace, which is kind of credited with establishing many of the stylistic tics and sort of narrative and visual tropes of that particular genre before it was popularized by Argento, basically like 6 years later. You got to feel bad for Bava. He was so ahead of the game that none of his movies ever did that particularly well, even though he was doing stuff like 10 years before they would become popular. And we paired that with Bird with the Crystal Plumage from 1970 by Dario Argento, which is, you know, probably the earliest example of a super financially successful Giallo film that basically even steals the twist from Bava's Blood and Black Lace. But yeah, both a lot of fun to talk about and very interesting to see. You know, we've talked about a lot of 70s and especially 80s Italian horror. Very cool to see it go back all the way to Mario Bava's, 1964 film and starting to see some of the early glimpses of, what slasher filmmakers would steal from in, literally like 15, 20 years later. So if that interests you at all, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. That was last week's episode that kicked off Spooktober. And but moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us to sort of continue Spooktober with a really, really, especially one film, really big film that a lot of people have been asking for a long time. And when I asked her what episode she wanted to come on, she specifically requested a Spooktober episode. So we have a returning guest. She is a writer on film for places like Paste, Polygon, Thrillist, Playlist, Little White Lies, and she has her own Substack that everyone I can definitely recommend checking out, where she is always talking about strangely horny things most of the time.
I guess that is a lot of what. It's not the only thing, but you are not wrong, brother.
And that is Brianna Zigler. Brianna, how are you doing?
I'm doing so good, guys. Thanks for having me again.
You were the only person
to talk about two horny films.
That's right.
Exactly.
This
I mean, you were the only person who wrote about an entire article on the cum shot from The Green Knight. So.
I did. Actually, you are wrong. There is another person who did. Her name is Chingy, and her article is very good. But we are kindred spirits in the cum shot article.
Yes.
I can't lay claim.
Hell yeah. Well, welcome back. As it goes on this show, Brianna, we have guests choose the double features. So what have you brought with you this week for Spooktober, and why did you pair these two films together?
I brought Coppola's Dracula and Daughters of Darkness because, well, my first choices were, they were from like past 2010, and so you were like, we don't do that, and I was like, okay, let's try again.
We don't do that
Let's
here.
try this again. But it was funny because my first choice was Dracula, And then I just was like, oh no, they've definitely like already talked about Dracula before, but I'm dumb as shit, and I just like did not realize you had that Letterboxd list that handily tells people what movies you've already talked about. So I would have known that you hadn't. But my first pairing that I thought from the jump was Dracula and Daughters of Darkness, and it was funny because you messaged me back and you were like, oh yeah, we could do Dracula, but like I don't know what would pair well with it because it's so like big and expansive. But I feel like Daughters of Darkness like obviously is not as like grand, but they are so like they vibe very well. They're both like so stylish and moody and like horny and like they have this same like kind of, I don't know, this I can't explain it other than this creepy vibe, this very like spooky, eerie vibe that is so specific to these two films that I like don't see replicated that often in like other horror movies that I just really, really love. So I think, they work really well together.
Yeah, it feels like these are more like the seductive vampire films.
Yeah.
They really focus hard on that aspect of it, so...
Yeah, and both obviously very gothic and kind of psychosexual as well, which is something that a very good material, I think, for the subject of vampires, especially. But that being said, I think we're going to jump right into it here. We are going to go, I think, chronologically, just to get. We typically like to kind of see what came first and what maybe might have inspired certain things from the other film. So let's start off with Daughters of Darkness.
If you think these ladies are something, wait until you meet Mother. She's something else.
All right, we are talking Daughters of Darkness, the 1971 English language Belgian erotic horror film directed by a filmmaker by the name of Harry, Kumel? Kumel, perfect.
Yeah.
And starring Delphine Seyrig and John Carlin and Danielle Ume. This is obviously a sort of French-Belgian kind of collaboration, and very cool to see Delphine, because I don't think we've talked about her yet on this show. We haven't really had much of an opportunity. It's not like the only other films I've seen her in were like Jean Delman, last year at Marienbad, kind of things that we probably won't get around to talking about on this particular show. Maybe I'll make some sort of excuse for maybe like Jacques Demy or something for something like Donkey Skin, just because it's got sort of like a fantasy musical aspect kind of to it. But this is a very early 70s erotic vampire film, which, believe it or not, was kind of a trend that kind of came out of nowhere, because obviously there's lots of literature and gothic horror fiction, dating back to even like the 1800s that include like lesbian vampires. I think like Carmilla is sort of like the big one that people note, and that's a gothic novella and is like the first example of a lesbian vampire, and it even predates like the original Dracula story. But in the late 60s, early 70s, Hammer Films was a really big deal. And they were obviously all about bringing back those classical Universal monsters, as well as kind of like that gothic horror atmosphere that, kind of went out of fashion for a little while, and bringing back some of those classic horror stories and adapting them for a contemporary, at the time, exploitation audience, especially, who wanted to see more sex and violence on the screen. We've talked about Hammer Films quite a bit, where you get like these very classically trained British actors and they're in a sequence and they're telling you a spooky story, and then all of a sudden, there is like a softcore sex scene or someone's decapitated, and it kind of like throws you off. And that was something that was really, really popular at the time. And there was a movie made called The Vampire Lovers in 1970 with Ingrid Pitt, which is a literal adaptation of that Carmilla story I was just referencing. And that was successful enough that it launched an entire trilogy that they made out of those. And after that, you can look it up. If you look up like vampire lesbians, you will find between the year like 1970 from Vampire Lovers to 1975, they probably made like 30 or 40 of these movies. Like it's actually kind of crazy just how big all of a sudden, all it took was Ingrid Pitt to be in one of them. And then, then you get obviously more exploitative examples, something like Jesus Franco's like very explicit Vampiros Lesbos, or Stephanie Rothman's The Velvet Vampire is one of the more like underrated ones. Eventually this would all lead to something like in the 80s, Tony Scott's The Hunger, which is something that we
definitely thought about that a lot while I was watching this.
Yeah, no, me too. Like that, very much that kind of like art house sensibility, but with like a little bit of sort of vulgarity to it and violence to it in a different way. And I tried to find out like what was, what Kumail was sort of interested in when he kind of approached this, and I couldn't find like anything on the dude. He's a Belgian director that kind of came out of nowhere and made like shorts and docs. And one of his narrative films, which was about a woman who cross-dressed to disguise herself after she killed the man who killed her lover. Apparently, that movie was nominated for like the Belgian-Dutch entry for Best Foreign Film in like '69. Basically, all that I could find about this guy.
Interesting.
That is really, really interesting.
But yeah, no, apparently he really wanted to do a very existential and gross romantic vampire movie. That was his dream.
That rules. That's so cool.
But Brianna, what was your first experience watching this one?
I watched it for the first time last year. I think someone recommended it to me on Twitter. I don't remember who. But yeah, I watched it last year during... I guess it wasn't lockdown anymore, but I got like really high and watched it, and it was like a really good movie to watch while high. I was definitely like kind of like, I don't know, I remembered like at a certain point like not paying attention to it as much anymore, because that can also sometimes happen when I'm high. But I really liked it, so I was eager to rewatch it again this year. And I want to say this because maybe you guys know the answer, but I watched a movie like recently, like sometime in the past month, and there's a scene with a character in a hospital, or like, I don't know, maybe just a bedroom, but they have a TV on in front of them, and it's playing Daughters of Darkness, and I cannot fucking remember what movie it is. I think it might be Margaret. Do you know? I think I like looked through my diary.
It might be. I can't remember.
Yeah.
That sounds like it could be a thing for sure.
Fuck yeah. Okay. But yeah, and I like literally cannot find it anywhere. I kept Googling Margaret, Daughters of Darkness in another movie, and it's just like nothing. But it was definitely in it. I have no idea why, but I mean it rules.
Yeah, I think that I had an interesting experience with it because I watched this for the first time. I think it was on like Criterion Channel for a while, and it was included in kind of like the 70s horror, I think, last year. So
yeah, last year, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was when I watched it, and I remember kind of having like a... not like an amazing reaction to it. I kind of got hung up on, like, weirdly enough, kind of like character decisions and some of the strange reactions they have to the thing, and how quickly the husband is like turned on by a corpse. And I remember thinking that there was just so many strange details that like I kind of wish were explored a little bit more. But I on rewatch here, and I'm glad that Brianna had me rewatch it. I ended up vibing with it a little bit more on this part, because it's clear that what the film is doing is more on a style level. It's more about this surreal expressionist mood of kind of like being entrapped and being swept up in this sort of like violent demagoguery, the same way you are, like a romantic partner, which is something that's, very intrinsic, I think, to this film. It opens on like full on purple, pink, and blue sex scene of just, the main two leads here, Stefan and Valerie, just grasping and thrusting and biting at each other. And it's interesting because like the scene is like, you know, obviously it's the first thing that you see, and it's like a softcore sex scene, basically.
Yeah.
But it does have a little bit of, you know, sort of like the surreal, ominous mood to it that, you know, is sort of clarified by the rest of the film, which involves Delphine Seyrig playing this Countess Battery, who is this vampire who comes from Hungary and has lived for possibly hundreds of years and always has some sort of mistress that she is corrupting and using as a tool for pleasure in different ways. And she decides that, you know, Valerie, this young, beautiful blonde, newlywed to Stefan, is going to be her new mistress. And also, I was really taken aback that how much very clearly they wanted someone like Catherine Deneuve to be in this movie. Like Valerie almost looks exactly like how you would expect Deneuve to look like, which was also very funny when you then connect it to The Hunger, which is like an older Catherine Deneuve playing the vampire countess role. But yeah, and I think that this has a very unique kind of push and pull to it. There's kind of like a psychosexual kind of like mind game of desire and domination that ends up kind of taking place under the surface between all these characters.
Something I really liked about it, and I at first was almost confused in a way, is they don't exaggerate the powers that she seems to have. Like when she's seducing them or kind of psychologically tricking them, there's nothing to really signify that she's doing any like mind games. It just kind of happens along with the smooth dialogue that she's given, and then all of a sudden she's just like, they'll be following her. Like for instance, when is it Valerie? Is that the girlfriend's name? When she is going to escape later on in the film and to get on the train, when she ends up talking to her and convincing her not to, there isn't a lot of dialogue or music or anything that's signifying anything powerful happening. It's just kind of like through her conversation, she's able to seduce them and trick them and make them do her will, essentially, and come along with her. But I found that interesting just on a style choice, that they don't hyper-focus on the power itself or anything like that. It just kind of naturally starts to occur.
Yeah.
It's almost like almost like an anti-vampire movie. There's such a lack of like actual like stylistic vampirism in the movie. They mention the word
definitely.
like once, and like there's that one scene towards the end where they both start like licking or eating Stefan's blood at the end as he's dying. But I mean, you never see any fangs. I mean, there's never like, I remember that was like one of the biggest things that struck me. And I think one of the things that kind of kept me out of it the first time I watched it was like, oh, this is a vampire movie, but like there's also like no vampires in it, but like they are vampires. But yeah, I mean, now on a second watch, I kind of love that. Mm-hmm. It's
especially
very interesting.
where it leads, because it takes like until the first real violent act, at least that you see on screen, because there are some like murders that they mention and all that. But it takes a good, I would say, like 50 minutes to an hour before any real violence happens, which I'm also not very used to from a vampire film or just horror movies that we usually tend to cover on this show in general. But when it comes time for the violence to occur, I think that time it took really helps, because you kind of set yourself in through all the seduction phases and all that. So by the time you get this like bizarre scene with a razor being cut and a girl being stabbed and things like that, it's very it's surprising. It's shocking at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's definitely, a very sort of European art house kind of style to it. I think I read someone compared it. They were kind of like, this is like what if Fassbinder made like a vampire movie in terms of the style. And I kind of agree with that, because I thought about like, for example, instead of other vampire films from the 70s or 80s, I was kind of thinking something more like Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant was kind of something that came to mind in terms of the style, and in terms of the way, especially that, you know, like it's a lot of these very beautiful, you know, wide images of the sort of Belgian locales. There's like there's these beautiful moments of like them honeymooning by going on a canal ride through Bruges, and you know, there's and the thing is that it's showing you all of these beautiful things, and also the style itself is just very decadent. The way that they use like the marble of the hotel and the big rugs and the huge like velvet colored furniture and things like that. There's a very surface style to it that is meant to kind of distract you a little bit from some of the, you know, grosser things that, you know, are happening underneath the surface of them, which involve, you know, this this countess vampire who has a long history of killing young people for their blood and preying on them, and we're kind of getting we're kind of dropped into the movie from the perspective of the innocent young people who are being courted, to being shown how they are, because you're right in the sense that, you know, it's not as simple as she's just going to bite them and convert them. She almost kind of wants them to open up to the idea before.
Yeah.
She actually she wants to get them turned on using violence. I actually do, you know, on rewatch especially, I really liked that scene where she is like just describing like the grossest massacres throughout Hungarian history.
Yeah, and that's when like
to the husband.
Isn't that when Stefan, he like gets turned on by it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right in front of his wife.
Yeah.
Because the first sign of it is obviously that they, you know, they're reading the newspaper, and there's these corpses who are popping up, and things like blood completely drained and throats slit, and they're talking about stuff like that, and Stefan gets very curious and intrigued about that, which kind of freaks out the Valerie character, his newlywed wife. And then the Countess brings them into the front lobby of the hotel, and because it's like, I guess it's the winter time, this hotel is like completely empty, other than the Countess and her current mistress and the young couple. And yeah, she just starts going on about I have the full quote somewhere in here, but like the stories that they are telling about, like, you know, just tearing the limbs off of people and draining their bloods and bathing in the blood, and you just get Stefan, just his eyes closed, like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful.
Right.
More of this, please.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep it up.
Oh yeah, here it is. Pricked bodies with needles, torn off nipples, pokers into the faces, clipped off fingers with shears.
All right.
Hung upside down and wrists slit. They're literally like getting horny and feeling each other up over this historical sort of like mythical violence, which is obviously like very upsetting. And what's interesting is that, you know, like that's all done just through dialogue and implication. You know, there's nothing explicit imagery to like kind of like show you that, but there's something so interesting about staying focused on the characters and their reactions to that. Like, he is having a orgasmic reaction to that woman whispering about bodily mutilation that he's having in like that opening scene. And I think part of what the Countess is trying to do in the way that she preys on these people is she's trying to show that this corruption is, you know, like within everyone in kind of a way, or within these people, that she's not, you know, completely alone in this kind of thing, which is something that the characters then have to wrestle with. They have something kind of awakened in them.
Yeah.
Very disturbing.
I feel like there is, and I think it's interesting that you said that the director's only other one of his other features was about like a cross-dresser, because then there's the whole thing with Steven's mother, which I feel like is that is like a whole thing. I like, that was something in my very high state watching this movie last year I did not catch. I just didn't notice it. And then this time I was like, oh, like I feel like that reveal is like sort of like in a way meant to imply that like Steven like has always been kind of fucked up. Like I feel like that is supposed to like tie into that, but that is very. When you said that guy's other film was about a cross-dressing man, I was like, oh, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
In comparison to this.
Yeah, because they really build to it, right? Like most of the early scenes of the movie are Valerie being like, why aren't you telling your family about our marriage? Like, are you ashamed or embarrassed of me? And it's, implied that he comes from this sort of like aristocratic British family, that, he has a Swiss wife who they might not approve of. Maybe they're just that racist that they're like, oh, wow, a Brit with a non-Brit or something like that.
Or just like, like so like snooty and rich and like they want him to marry into royalty, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, and he's very reluctant to talk to his mother, and he's trying to distract Valerie with food and pleasures of the hotel and the beautiful sort of honeymooning that they are doing and everything like that. And eventually he does call. Yeah, and it's just this cross-dressed man on the phone who is referring to himself as his mother, and both disapproves but is also strangely intrigued by the call at the same time.
Yeah.
Such a weird conversation that they have.
And we never go back to him or her. No. I mean, we there's no, like, we never learn what is up with that and, like, what is up with Steven's family. And it's just like, we never go back to it. It's just like left there. And I feel like the implication is meant to be that he is like weird and perverted and like psychosexually fucked up because of that. And
then all it takes is a vampire countess to just tease that out of him.
I fucking guess.
Yeah, well, and too, the way that the camera especially like gets sort of like fixated and obsessed with the young characters the same way that the Countess does, like the way that there's like these very voyeuristic images of them like walking along the beach at nighttime and everything like that, and you just get like Delphine being like, "Did you see her skin? Her lips," over like these very gorgeous, images on the beach and then in the hotel, and obviously these like very, very gorgeous like costumes and production design that they kind of put together for the entire thing as well. I don't think Delphine like wears the same outfit twice.
No,
she's got like long silk stuff. She's got near the end, she's in like that huge shiny silver dress. That like,
the sparkly dress. Oh my god, the way it like reflects the camera light, like it is so cool.
I love at a certain point too how they use her clothing as imagery for vampires. Like she has that long cloak that she wraps around Valerie with on the beach, and right before that, it's got this like great zoom out, so you see it in just this big wide shot, and then you see her open it up exactly like the old school Dracula does, and then closes her in. That was very cool. I liked that quite a bit. Just a cool signifier for like the old school vampire stuff. Kind of brought into this newer wave, I guess.
I read on the Wikipedia that apparently, like, she only wears red, black, and white because she's a demagogue, and they wanted it to like evoke like Nazis.
Oh, interesting.
They wanted her to come from like this, sort of Hungarian right-wing kind of background.
I thought that was interesting.
Of history. So she doesn't wear anything that's not on the Nazi insignia, basically. Which is it's interesting, and there are like choices sort of made that kind of get you to an interesting idea of sort of, I guess. Because ultimately, this film ends up being more about sort of like control and submission of, whether it's like a romantic partner or a sexual partner or someone who you just want to own. You want to, there's something interesting about, sort of like how it ties sexual expression and these exertions of power that started to make more sense to me, especially on a second watch. Like, for example, the scene when the husband just starts suddenly like beating Valerie and trying to have like sadomasochistic sex, like something has, infected and been brought out of him by the Countess's sort of like liberating behavior, where one, again, it's sort of like sexual liberation in a way, but obviously it's also extremely grotesque and harmful. And, he's literally like whipping her with a belt, and the camera holds on these dolly shots like outside the window frame so that, it's not intimate like the opening scene is.
Oh, yeah. And a storm is going on, and you see like the waves crashing on the dock and all that. And then also the image afterwards, when in the morning where they wake up, is really just terrifying.
And she's got the bruises.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and she's got the bruises, but she's also in a position where it looks like she's kind of like trying to cover herself, and he is facing her and still holding the belt. So it almost like has this implication that he was doing it until like they both fell asleep. Like they literally fell asleep just while he was violently hitting her. Like it was just that long of a period. And because just having that image of him still holding it after he's asleep, it's like he never let that thing go the entire night. It's just just horrifying.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting that, it does become sort of like this very grotesque, almost like love triangle situation where, Valerie is kind of just like, who do I choose? Do I choose this like possibly Nazi vampire or do I choose my husband, who very clearly, has similar impulses that she does, but at least she's, kind of, she wants to dress me up more like a Barbie and just hang out with me and give me marriage advice.
I feel like oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I also feel like the dynamic between Ilona, the mistress, and Stefan is interesting, because I feel like she views him as like a way out. She doesn't want to be with the Countess anymore, and she thinks that like Stefan is like an escape, which of course, turns out to not be. He's just another abuser, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it really interesting, the implication that he was very horny about the corpse of the woman on the street. And then when he eventually has sex with Ilona, it's in this weird, like, position where they're both just, like, laying there like dead bodies. It's so weird.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going on there, other than I did find it interesting the way that it's shot, where again, like, it's just like there's this heavy focus on just like skin touching skin in like these close-up images, and then like they have like their legs on each other, but neither of them are moving, but they're both very clearly like having sex. And I was trying to I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
It's a very different
much, that's for sure. Yeah.
It's a very different kind of sex than the sadomasochistic one that he was having in the previous scene with his own wife, especially, and also too the really sad existence of Ilona. I love when, she kind of interprets the Countess's interest in Valerie as kind of like an escape for her, and that her chance to kind of get out. And she goes through with her plan because she assumes that that's kind of like, she's being given, freedom from this kind of position that she's in. And they kind of have this sort of employer-employee kind of, or slave and master kind of relationship that they have. Mm-hmm. And it ends up being kind of like really sad the way that, it is shown both in the visual style, how like not in control she is. Like when the Countess returns back to her hotel room and Ilona has to like wait for her in the door frame naked, which is then a shot that's repeated when Valerie is now the woman that she owns, and she has to do that exact same thing, like how much control that she has over these people. And then also, she very clearly tells Ilona, go have sex with this man who I have awakened his violent tendencies intentionally. And go have fun with him while I court his bride. And, obviously, of course, that's going to end in Ilona being killed. Yeah. Which is exactly what happens. And it's a really, like, brutal scene where, like, the husband is very clearly trying to have like shower sex with her, but trying to like force her into it in a way that's scaring her. And she ends up, falling all over the bathroom and slicing her hand open on the straight razor, which is, sort of signified early in the film that when the husband kind of cuts himself shaving, and it's this sort of like this, small domestic ritual that turns into to violence. And then obviously that same shaving tool is then, stabbed right through this woman and she dies there. And I love the sequence too, that it doesn't go into the melodrama when the Countess and the wife come back. Like the wife just found her husband cheating on her and killing the woman that he cheated on her with. And the first thing they all go is, no one's going to believe that this was an accident. So let's all just like cover this up together. And I love that the husband is like in the foreground on the bed, just like covering his naked body with like the blanket or the towel or whatever. And you just see the two women in the background, just like trying to like move the body around and wrap it up and things like that. It's just, it's very, in tune with, some of the more gross details of the things that they're doing visually.
There's a very funny line that they say, like, when they get back from, like, disposing of her body. I think, like, Valerie says to Steven, like, it's, like, something along the lines of, like, how could she treat her friend this way? Like, just, like, just something, like, absurd, like, oh, like, we just, like, dumped the body in like, a hole by the ocean. Like, it's not very nice of her to do that to her friend. And I was like... It's just like such a funny little like throwaway line. Like, I guess this is a little suspicious, huh? Kind of weird. She's a little twisted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that whole burial sequence too has like, some very like strange moments to it. I do like some of the, again, I got hung up on narrative the first time I watched this, and the second time I was just all about like, some of the strange momentary elements of the film where like the mood completely takes over on like a detail that doesn't make perfect sense but gets into the feelings of the characters. It has like expressionist gestures like that, and one is when the husband just like falls into the pit that they put the body into, and dirt just starts falling all over him, like he's literally being like drowned with dirt by the Countess, even though they're technically helping him cover up this death that he's done. And then there's this great shot of his hand reaching out of the dirt like it's like a zombie movie or something, and his wife has to like reach in and grab him and pull him out. And there's just something so, sort of creepy about the idea of, her husband being this, now to her, like this murderous figure who she needs to pull out of a grave like a zombie. And the Countess in the background freaking out, like the night is dying. We need to hurry. Like, the sun is coming.
That. I love that. I don't know. There's just something like so. I don't know. I can't describe like what I loved about that. And then towards the end, where it's just like the dawn is like creeping in on them, and he just gets so insistent about the sunlight. It's like one of the few very immediately vampiric things about her is the sun, which is kind of funny.
And not like the fast-paced nature of the whole thing eventually, because it is a very slow-moving film a lot of the time. I would never say it's boring. It's just it does slowly dish out the information and all that. Whereas this last 10 minutes is like a speeding bullet. I mean, she's going 160 kilometers down this like country road trying to outrun the sun, and it's just like all these really fast moving camera pans and all that, and then it turns into this exploding hellfire where she's stabbed into a branch and the car explodes and she's set aflame, and like it really just goes over the top for the last 10 minutes. And I think the best possible way, because it really does lead you into this kind of explosive finale. It felt like death was really the only thing that this movie was going to end with. And it
definitely
does.
A doomed quality to it.
Yeah, definitely. Although I guess Valerie ends up kind of taking the place of the Countess, which I found just a little confusing, because it did look like that car exploded pretty thoroughly, but
Which is not, she wasn't stabbed. That's the thing with vampires.
right,
You know, you learn that in Dracula, you have to stab them through the heart and cut off their head, which I
That's
guess
right.
didn't happen to the Countess, but, you know, they kept the stab in the heart thing.
yeah.
Yeah, very unlucky to go headfirst through the windshield and to get a wooden stake through the heart completely by accident.
And then be beside the car that
One way that you can
explodes.
die.
Yeah. Oh man, what a way to go.
But yeah, no,
By the way.
that stuff's really cool. Like again, the build up to the way that she seeds, you know, these sort of dark qualities in their relationship. Like she basically like, you know, ignites the violent impulses of the husband so that the wife gets abused and runs into her own arms.
Yes.
And wants to be a little Barbie doll, and she's dressing her up and she's doing her hair, and you know, she's basically just another object in the hotel for her, and she's so stoked that she has turned her like completely against her husband. And obviously, you know, you understand that too, because the husband is, you know, being like a weird, perverted, violent freak at that point as well. And that sequence, you know, when they you know, she basically stages it where she can, you know, ignite the husband's anger and be like, you know what, you're gonna blame this on the Countess, the fact that you slept with Alona, when we know that it was the Countess's plan was for that to happen. Yeah, she's trying to pitch them this idea that, you know, we've got a lot of nights ahead of us. We can live eternally. We can do all of this. And the husband is like, yeah, you've seen a lot of nights like last night, or even worse nights. And you know, then he starts going crazy, and he's like, I am a man and she is mine, and you can't take my wife, and you know, all of this kind of stuff. And either way, they end up like shattering this like bowl on him that ends up slicing his wrists open. And that's
Love
when
the way that they do that. It is so goofy. It breaks. They're strong enough to break that thick ass bowl, and then the pieces just happen to like fall forcefully enough on his wrists that they just slice wide open, and they're not even like vertically; they're just horizontal.
Yeah, there's something to be said about really all the deaths in this, especially like I would say, everything is so subtle for the most part, but all the deaths are way over the top. Even the razor one, she ends up like dropping the razor like right side up on the floor and lands on it, and so that's how she dies. And then you got the vampire going through the windshield, through the getting impaled, setting ablaze. And then you have the other one, like, the deaths are so crazy over the top compared to all the subtlety of kind of the seduction and the romance that happens in every other part of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because the way that they obviously mentioned earlier that, you know, these aren't, you know, I think the detective who recognizes her from 50 years earlier, the Countess, giving her this timelessness, he mentions that, you know, ghosts and ghouls, and, you know, he's referencing kind of like the idea of vampires as like this this sort of supernatural thing. And the few moments of supernatural violence that take place in this film are basically handled like a Final Destination movie.
Yeah.
Where people just like fall on objects in hilarious ways and just end
Very
up
funny.
getting completely killed by them. But yeah, when the husband's wrists slit and then they both start just drinking from his you know, his slit wrists, and you know, you do at that point realize, you know, what kind of journey you've been on from the opening scene of intimate sex between Valerie and Stefan to this very intimate, you know, sort of three-way between these two, but involving Stefan being drained of his blood, and then they like hurl his body off the balcony. And
I thought
Throw
that
it into the filthiest ditch I've ever seen.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I thought it was just
And then,
so funny. It's just so funny how like my immediate thought when they dump him over the side is like, okay, they've dumped him over the side into the middle of the street in front of the hotel. Like, I guess they've got to just like hope for the best that no one like gets to it by the time they come down. I was like, boy, that was pretty ballsy of them.
Yeah, she even stops to give him a kiss before she puts the body back into the car. So yeah, she took
felt
her
like
time.
they had all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, but then they drive fast as hell, as Jamie mentioned, and they end up crashing that car due to the daylight that shines briefly on them, and impaled on the tree, exploded into flames. What an image too of the wide shot of her body just hanging off the tree, impaled as it starts catching fire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, then as we mentioned, Valerie is then in the black cloak of the Countess and preying on a tennis couple at a vacation retreat. And I love the buildup of the music as the camera like cranes upwards following her, where we know she's about to do the same thing that the Countess just did, and then until the music suddenly stops, and then it cranes all the way down so that we are down behind the gate. And like we know that, you know, this is inevitable, that they are trapped. This is officially kind of over. It's not romantic anymore in that kind of moment. And then that's when it cuts to black. So, you know, I think that stuff ultimately, you know, sort of like the visual sensibility and the more sort of dreamy, surreal kind of expressionistic qualities, even in, you know, even in the fucking like softcore stuff, which is shot poetically, it's like bodies entwined and twisting and contorting and bleeding. And, you know, there's you get a feeling exclusively almost through the style of this idea of sort of youthful beauty and innocence being preyed upon by this very malevolent historical figure of power that, you know, is both a seductive force and a corrupting force kind of simultaneously. And I do like that, you know, it's not as overtly, you know, like the vampire is not going around killing these people. It's showing them that they are kind of capable of being just as monstrous as she is, if they are just given the right path and the right door and the right motivation.
Right.
So yeah, I found it like very interesting. And if we're pivoting towards reductive rating round, which Brianna, you've been on before, I'm sure you know, we reduced the movie to a number between 1 and 5, and we've also turned into kind of like closing statements where if there was a scene or a line or anything that we missed that you wanted to make sure got in before we finished up. But this one, my first watch, it was kind of in the high 3 territory, and this watch definitely got upgraded to like kind of like the solid 4 territory.
Yeah.
And again, I think a lot of that is due to the style. I think it's both hypnotic and ghostly, and you know, both mythical and erotic somehow, and it's very, very gorgeous. And I've thought about it a lot since watching it and having kind of like a lukewarm response to it, and it really stuck with me. It has very lush mise-en-scène and colors to it, the off-kilter score to it as well, that basically changes with the psyches of the characters as they are on like this kind of like fetish dreamscape gothic Euro horror type thing. I ended up being a lot more taken with just that general atmosphere and how that applies to the characters and some of the things that they are doing, because you really do have to very quickly buy into that these characters already have kind of perverse qualities lingering beneath them, and the Countess is just bringing it out of them. Because if you don't, you know, there's not a lot of overt motive, I guess, for a lot of things that just start happening. But if you can buy into that, and I think the style is there to help you, I think that there's, you know, you'll get a lot out of this, especially how, you know, it ends up again being this idea of, you know, how desire and domination and control and submission are sometimes things that are kind of intertwined within you. And, you know, again, it's a classic vampire sex and death kind of metaphor as well. And again, you gotta love the shiny dresses and the colors and the architecture and mirrors and corridors and just everything. Great time.
Yeah, I'd give this a 4 as well. I love the style. I love the mood. Something that I really liked that I didn't mention was the use of like the lighting that they do, especially at nighttime. It gives off this like dark blue and purple lighting that kind of shines into the room. And I like the contrast, like in the beginning scene when they're having sex, it's in this like purple kind of lighting, and it's, you know, kind of romantic and it feels mysterious in a way as well. And then when they're when they're done, he turns on the lights and it's just this bright fluorescent light that kind of ruins all of that mood, and people are like in the movie are even kind of blinded by it a little bit. And then later on, the vampire the Countess, she's talking and saying that the lights are too bright, and so they put this like red scarf over it to create this like blood red lighting that comes into the room, and it's
that's so sick.
Yeah, and I really liked that. It was just that contrast there was very cool, and I just love the slow, seductive nature of the whole movie, but then has these rare moments of just violent explosions that are way over the top and crazy. So I think those really work well together. Yeah, 4 out of 5. This was awesome.
Yeah, I also would give this a 4 out of 5 for sure. Very ghostly. That was a great word, Josh, that I think you used. That is like a atmosphere I really like prize in movies. It's a reason why I love this and Coppola's Dracula. I feel like they create this very haunting atmosphere that I just do not see replicated in a lot of movies. And that, it just is very much my vibe. Great movie about how we're all secret perverts. That is definitely main takeaway from this is that we're all secret perverts.
It honestly doesn't take a lot to bring it out of you.
It does not take, and it doesn't take a lot. That is definitely the key here. But one of my favorite like little things that we didn't mention and that I want to mention now is the drink that she has when they kind of like sit down together that evening the first time. Do you remember that like thick, like teal colored, like alcoholic drink that she's having? And it's not like some weird, like, I don't know, vampiric elixir. Like she like gives it to Steven to like go like mix her another drink. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like they don't mention it. Do either of you know like what it's supposed to be? Is that like a drink that people have?
I think absinthe might be green.
Oh, okay.
If I'm correct, but I don't 100% know. And if she is drinking that, the
Countess
she's
was
going
getting
for it.
Fucked up.
Yeah.
God damn. Yeah, it is like a bright teal drink. Yeah. Anyway, that was just like cool.
That's awesome.
That's what you need when you're 300 years old and the only person who remembers you is the guy at the hotel who was like a little boy the last time you were there.
He's like so fucked up by her too.
Just trying to get her buzz on.
But yeah,
Hell
great
Well,
flick.
I think that will wrap it up for Daughters of Darkness. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Dracula.
Make no mistake, he must be stopped.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1992 American Gothic horror film directed and produced by one Francis Ford Coppola, someone you might have heard of, based on the 1897 novel, obviously Dracula by Bram Stoker. I'm sure most of the people listening have probably seen this. I think this is, it wasn't like the biggest movie at the time, although it was financially successful, which was good for Coppola.
That's good to hear.
It was basically the movie that he made for that reason. Because you guys heard the thing, right? That it was Apocalypse Now, and what was the other one that he did after that? That he kept going over budget and kept like fucking with the studios. So he basically owed them two financially successful movies. So that was why Godfather 3 and Dracula were made like back to back, because he was like, these are sure things to make money. So, but also he loves the Dracula story. So
you can tell.
Like it was a really big deal for him, because I think Winona Ryder famously dropped out of Godfather 3 because of some sort of scheduling conflict, which is why Sofia Coppola had to play the role that Winona was supposed to be playing in. But as she was dropping out, she handed him the script So Winona had the script before Coppola did, and she gave it to Coppola because she liked how sort of rawly emotional and sexual it was, and she liked the idea of doing these sort of like ladies in corsets, but the movie is about how sexually repressed they are. That was something Winona really took to.
Yeah.
And she gave it to Coppola, who was still really frustrated over Godfather 3 shit that was kind of going wrong. And Winona says that he lit up when he saw the name Dracula, because as a kid, it was just one of his favorite stories. And it was something that reminded him of like campfire stories. That was the vibe it kind of gave him. So you can tell basically, you know, you can definitely feel the glee he takes in doing this and stylizing this. And honestly, this is my third time watching it, and it has become my favorite version of this story.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite Dracula story as well.
It took a couple watches because I think that there are some qualities that, you know, people love to hark on, especially some of the performances and some of the I guess maybe some of the dialogue and some of the writing and whatnot.
I've seen many strange things.
I know where the bastard sleeps.
But do you know what one of my favorite things about that is, though, is that Coppola does not begrudge Keanu like at all.
Yeah, I love it.
Love it.
He says that the issue he thinks with Keanu was that because he said that most people just think that he just wasn't trying, that he didn't do the work, he didn't put the work in. Coppola actually says that Keanu put tons of work into it, and he said that was actually the issue, is that they couldn't get him on set to say any of the lines naturally or comfortably, because he was just exerting so much effort trying to like do it right that he just kept it came out stilted.
Right.
But Coppola says to this day he is a prince in my eyes.
That's awesome.
That's so
I
sweet.
love it.
So if Coppola can forgive some of the goofy line readings, definitely I can. And yeah, for me, the Dracula story has always been kind of interesting because, like, obviously, there's this has been a story that's been adapted since the dawn of cinema. Essentially, you can go back to the original vampire stories. You can go back to, obviously the Universal version of Dracula with Bela that kind of has some nice sets and whatnot. But I've always been kind of the Universal monster movies, kind of meh on that one. It has like a kind of like stage like distance to it that never really got me into the material. It doesn't hold up in comparison to like something like Nosferatu, for example, which is, gets a lot more of the atmosphere and the imagery right, the shadows and the claws and the gothic horror of it. Definitely more, Coppola definitely steals more from that in the look of this than he does Universal Monsters version of it. And then obviously Herzog did a Nosferatu remake in the 70s with Kinski, where he just Klaus Kinski is just outwardly lusting for Isabella Gianni, which was a good update on it and definitely got some of the hornier aspects of it that the other ones didn't.
Yeah.
And so Coppola kind of takes this entire history of this story and the entire history of like the medium of film itself and collapses it all into kind of like one thing. And as a result, this is the one that I kind of end up feeling. I totally get the operatic passion of both the story and the filmmaking in this in a way that I don't a lot of the other versions of it. So the way that he goes back to the original material and repurposes it, especially honing in on the romantic sex and violence qualities, which is something that, most kind of didn't shy away from, but didn't hone in as crazy as he did. Like the romance aspect here between Dracula and between his long-lost, timeless love with Winona Ryder, who is his bride, who kills herself early in the film and ends up kind of coming back as a born-again kind of figure that he's searching for. That romance is more deeply felt than in any version of this story, I think. And it's so operatic. I mean, the tone setter just in the introduction, where it's based in history. I can't remember the exact year it's supposed to be based in, but it's when Dracula was kind of like a king, a fighter for the church.
Oh,
it's
1400s.
You say this. It's 1462.
Okay.
I'm a nerd.
And like just the way that he does this, he's got everyone in the battleground silhouetted, but there's red for the background, so it's like red skies,
blood
and
red
black.
sky. Yeah,
it's amazing. And so you
So
see all
good.
these impalings, but they're all done through shadow. So you just see like spears going through people and being stuck up, and obviously it has imagery of like
being
Vlad the
lifted into
Impaler.
the air while still alive.
Yeah, and then they set that into kind of a loss of love story at when he arrives and his lover has committed suicide, thinking that he's died in war, and it turns it like Gary Oldman is just giving this like incredibly over the top theatrical performance where he's like screaming to the gods like I renounce you and blood is flowing and it's just like it's an unbelievable.
Is this my reward for defending God's church?
Yeah,
I love the idea.
But he's doing it in like the Transylvanian or whatever.
Right, and then you have that like the really dark gothic opera that goes on when the title card goes Bram Stoker's Dracula. There's just that tone is such that's the setting of tone in this introduction is unbelievable. It's just so moody and so over the top. I love it.
I like the idea that like he became a vampire just from getting really mad. Like that's kind of like how it happens. But also like the intro sequence with the like war happening with the red in the background, are those like real people? Because it looks like shadow puppets. I feel like maybe that's the effect that it's. I had to like rewind it to like, because I watched a video recently, like a video on YouTube that where these guys were just like talking about this movie and some of the effects that were done, and I was gonna rewatch it for this, but I didn't have time. But I thought they like talked that sequence was like puppets, but like I'm not sure. I rewatched it and I could not tell because sometimes the movements looked.
Yeah,
It's brought up later where Dracula now posing as sort of just like the Prince Vlad,
the guy,
obviously named after Vlad the Impaler, which is where they get all the imagery of the bodies on spikes and the dismembered and the armor, the devil armor that he's wearing and shit like that.
Sick.
But there's a part where he takes her to the movies, right? Like the early Cinematheque or whatever, and when he takes her there, there's actually a part where it cuts to a reenactment of the same opening scene, but it is done as like this little puppet show in the background.
Oh, that's awesome.
So very possible it's the same as that, or they just applied the same techniques to the real actors. It's very possible because
so cool.
Obviously the groundbreaking like VFX in this movie. I mean, not even groundbreaking is not, I guess, the right word, because basically he chose to do dated effects rather than doing computer effects.
Yeah.
But he held to that with everything, and I didn't realize how heavily he held to it. Because there are some images like, there's so many great images of like things overlapping other imagery throughout the film. There's a constant sense of flowing and crossfading, but sometimes superimposed images are connected to each other.
Yeah.
Like obviously one of the most famous ones is like the image of the diary, where it looks like the train is literally riding on top of the diary. That's like a really big one. Or
when his eyes superimpose over the sky to look like he's looking at Jonathan. That one's amazing.
Yeah, and
that's like my favorite shot.
Yeah,
and
I love
so
it.
fucking cool.
So I thought that stuff, and did you guys think this too? That was compositing. That was they shot it all practically, but it was like composited in the editing room. That it was just spliced images together.
I learned from that video that I referenced that it was like mostly in camera effects.
Yeah,
wow.
That was what shocked me.
It's insane.
Like all of that stuff was in camera, and especially so. For example, the one with the diary. They built the miniature set of the train. So that's a real miniature train driving by. Mm-hmm. And the diary is not a separate shot put on top. It is a 20-foot long book that has been placed in front of the train so that it gives the effect of, it's looking like the diary is just in front of the camera. But apparently that didn't work because it didn't connect it to the train. So they had to build a big one because then they could use the lighting and they could put like the shadow of the train and the shadow of the smoke, the steam from the train, like actually hitting the book when it was like this giant book. And yeah, that's how they did a lot of that. They did a lot of double exposure, which is where you film something, but then you don't actually develop the film. You actually run the film back and shoot something again, and then you expose them together so that the two things that you shot are combined on the same film.
Okay.
And so they did that for a lot of things. Like that's how they got the rats walking when Keanu goes into Dracula's castle, and everything is meant to feel surreal and off kilter, and the world is unbalanced because he's in this new strange world. There's a part where like the rats are running on the ceiling across like a steel pole, and they did that by literally holding the camera upside down, filming a real rat just walking normally along a pole, running the film back, and then filming the stuff with Keanu where just the rat stuff was at the top. So they filmed it twice, and then you get, so in camera, you get the effect of rats running on the ceiling, which is something that's obviously physically impossible.
That whole like Dracula's castle sequence is just like a fun house of like special effects, like magic. I mean, it's just
it's unreal.
The coolest fucking thing.
I love the
the bit with Dracula's shadow moving
I was just gonna
completely
say.
separately.
And they do it throughout the entire film, and every single time it happens, I just get giddy. Like I'm like, this is incredible. It's so just haunted house-esque. I love it. Like, and especially
Jamie.
when it starts to really become detached. Like there's a moment where Jonathan is like talking to him, and you see the shadow in the background, and then there's this face that he gives off all of a sudden, and it's because he just suddenly disappeared and turned up to the left of him, and the shadow does like a turn over to the other side where he's supposed to be, and like there's just so many well thought out little scares like that are, they're scary. It's more creepy than anything, but the atmosphere is just off the charts. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Do you know how they did the shadow stuff? It's really funny.
No,
I don't remember.
Literally, it's just doing hand puppets.
What?
Hell
like
yes.
literally, like the same function of just putting a shadow in front of like a light and just putting it on the background. So what they did was they had Keanu and Oldman doing the performance in the foreground of the scene, but then they had a guy who just had like these elongated claws and like the butt that Gary Oldman has on his head.
Oh my god.
And so that he had the same shadow figure, and they literally just had a guy on the side doing shadow movements separately from Oldman.
So it is authentic.
So it's not. Yeah, like it's again, none of it was done in post. They literally just captured that with a guy doing different shadow motions like off camera.
Oh man,
so that it looked like Oldman's shadow
It's
had like a
unreal.
body of its own.
And the practicality of all the effects really makes it so like Dracula just feels that much more powerful. Like I was talking about the superimposing of him like throughout the entire movie. Really, he's constantly like there's many moments where a character looks up into the sky and they almost see Dracula's eyes looking over them. And I'll say like out of all of the vampire movies that I've seen, I just feel like this one perfectly explains the supreme power that someone like this would have. Like like we were talking about Daughters of Darkness and how it's very subtle, and I like the way that it does that. But just this one does the complete opposite, where it's showing like all of his power, what he's very capable of doing.
It's as grandiose and supernatural overtly as like it could possibly
to the point where it's stuff that I think he's almost even adding to the lore. Like eventually he's turning into a wolf, and he's turning into a snake, and he's turning into like a giant vampire bat, which I guess would be the classic one. But there's so many transformations and different powers.
Turns into
a
rats.
pile of rats.
Exactly. And there's just so many different powers and transformations that takes place for Dracula in this, that it's like he feels like the most powerful version of Dracula in this film, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even the way that he floats over towards Keanu, the way that he walks across, he's literally like floating across the room. And as he's slowly like just creeping Keanu out and being like, your fiance looks pretty nice, just the kind of vibe that he's giving off. And literally there's a point where they move the set walls closer to them. They literally just had people lift the set walls and move them in to make it look like Dracula is literally like entrapping him as the walls are almost touching him.
Oh my
and
god!
stuff. Like,
so much work went into this, and you can tell, right? Like in every single scene,
he had to fire the original VFX team because they told him there was no way to achieve any of the storyboarding he had.
You have to believe.
Computers.
You don't believe.
Jesus.
Yeah, and he was like, no, it's all going to be in camera. It's all going to be rear projection and double or multiple exposure and matting techniques and forced perspective techniques. And the reason that he said that he was so committed to it was because he was like, this story takes place pretty close to like the dawn of movie making. And if I'm going to, he wants to collapse time. He basically wants 1890 and 1990 to be completely indistinguishable from each other to an audience watching this film. And, as a result, I mean, it gives this movie, a very timeless feeling to it. It's like the last stand of analog filmmaking before digital filmmaking like became the norm. Like Jurassic Park came out 1 year later,
right?
And that was like considered like one of like the first really big like CGI sort of moments where people started to really believe it in the film. So, Coppola was like completely against the idea. He was just like, this is going to be, if Dracula went to the movie house, these are the techniques he would have fucking seen in a movie. Yes. And that's such a genius idea. Like looking back at it. Just simple stuff like, reversing footage and upside down footage and, matting and painting.
Making giant books.
Making giant books, which was not how I thought they did that.
A seductive like dream bed when the vampiresses go after Jonathan. That's an amazing moment too. Like just the way that he has all the like the sheets flowing in the wind and then the girls rise from the bed itself. Like there's just something so otherworldly about the entire thing. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and how that all is blended into, one, the idea that Dracula is strange and surreal and powerful and evil, entirely based on, as Brianna, kind of put it, because he's angry. That's literally it. Right. He's super angry, and he stabs
angry and horny
across until it gushes blood everywhere.
So funny.
And, that is why he is able to do all of these things. And that is honestly kind of scary, that some dude's just heartbreak and rage is enough to literally turn the world completely upside down in the way that, it is for a lot of the characters who experience this. And the way that they do POV images, like when he becomes the Wolfman and he starts, trying to attack Winona Ryder's friend Elizabeth in the film. Like there's a shot in this film where she is just full out having legs spread, full sex with a Wolfman.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Unreal. And that's after too, they have that really amazing like atmospheric part where she's got the red cloak and she's putting it over the statue in the garden and all of that.
Yeah.
Leads into this it's actually
the
beautiful.
Overhead shots of the maze that they're running around in like the silk gowns and stuff.
Yeah, it's mysterious and haunting but kind of gorgeous, and then cut to having sex with a Wolfman. Unbelievable.
And that also has like when Winona Ryder like stumbles upon them having sex and like he sees her and he realizes it's her, and then it's that great like shot of Gary Oldman's face like overlaid on the Wolfman. It reminded me of that. I remember when I like saw that it reminded me of and this was definitely inspired by it, but like the scene in What We Do in the Shadows where it's like he can't get the faces right, he turns into a cat. What's his name? I fucking forget. Why can't I remember his name? That actor. You know who I'm talking about. The guy who turns into cats. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fucking hilarious.
He can never get the faces right. Yeah.
Well, there's that one that kind of reminded me of one shot in the movie where eventually he kind of gets some of his powers back, so he's able to look like his younger self, but he still does transformations. And while he's younger, he has this like amazing long like curly metal hair that's just absolutely incredible. And there's a shot where he's turning into the kind of wolf monster kind of thing, but he still has the hair. So it looks like he's got the wolf face, but he's got the long metal hair that he has like from his 1800s version of his body. And for some reason, that image just stuck with me. I thought it was equally, there's humor to it in a way.
I think it's hugely, I think that stuff's hugely important because this whole idea is that, this guy is both things. He is this hideous, eternal infernal monster, constantly suffering, constantly in pain, that you kind of sympathize with on some level. But also, you know, if given the chance, you know, he wishes to just be, you know, like this normal guy.
Yeah.
He wants to be just like this. Well, I mean, with a creepy accent and with, you know, and
Of course.
with a princely amount of money and everything like that. But, you know, it's very funny, this idea that, you know, this character who, again, as we mentioned, it ups the monstrous qualities and the violence of what he does and how scary he is and what he's capable, the power that he has.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes that. But then also shows you that, like, deep down, this guy literally wants to, like, take Winona Ryder on a date. That's what
Yes.
that, you know,
Just
that's
wants to show her a good
ultimately
time.
his dream. And I love when he first arrives in London, and he starts, you know, he's got his big old hat and cane, and he's got his long hair flowing. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's the frame jumping from silent cinema is in that. And it turns out that they really got a silent era film camera to fucking film that.
Of course
Yes.
they did.
That was another thing I learned. Yeah.
Yeah,
So cool.
so they wanted to connect it to, you know, sort of like early 1900s cinema of him walking around. So he's literally like the silent era character, just thinking that he's in a romance story, and then it actually changes to the normal film cameras when he sees her, and it's like that moment of like, oh my god, this is the woman. And Winona is just, you know, around town thinking about her husband, looking at pornographic medieval drawings. Which is always a funny detail. I think Winona really did, you know, again, she really latched onto the material because of the idea of how repressed her character was and how Dracula kind of like freed her almost a little bit. And you do get a little bit of that. You get to see her get pretty crazy when she's like, I don't care, turn me into a vampire.
Yeah.
And she's like sucking on his like his sliced open nipple.
His nipple. Oh my god, that scene is so like crazily like, I don't know, erotic, like weirdly erotic. That inversion of like, I don't know, her sucking on his nipple. It's like,
and also he easily could have like cut the neck and done the classic vampire thing, but I just love how Coppola's like, no, we're cutting nipple, baby.
Let's make
That's
this
what we're
fucked.
doing. Yeah, we're getting a little more perverse. Let's get
love
this
that.
going.
Hell yeah, dude.
It's amazing.
Yeah, well, and I like too that, you know, again, there's something so sad also about the power because it's so painful, and there's a part of him that is like, my existence is kind of hell. Like, look at the way like my actual body looks unless I start consuming other people for power.
He almost doesn't let her. Like, she really is.
Yeah,
the one
he almost doesn't want her to do it because he's like, I don't
it.
want to curse you as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
And also because, you know, he sees what has happened to his other wives, the other Dracula wives, the three wives, including Monica Bellucci, who just rises out of Keanu's crotch, just like completely naked in like a headdress.
What
and
an
they're
image.
like chanting and licking him everywhere and like combining into like little Cronenberg walking monsters at one point.
Yeah.
And then you even get that like hyper close up of Keanu as he realizes they're about, like, don't they eat a baby or something like that?
Yes, they do.
They
do.
literally, he's like, don't eat my my you know, dream girl's fiance. Eat this baby instead.
And then it's got this like incredibly exaggerated zoom with Keanu just screaming at the top of his lungs. It's just another over the top quality that I love.
Yeah,
I love his I mean, this is like obvious, but just his whole journey to Dracula's castle and being at Dracula's castle and just how like unperturbed he is, like just being like like this doesn't seem right, but I like tweeted something like I tweeted like a little meme from Always Sunny with Mac, and I was just like, this doesn't seem right, but I don't know enough about Transylvania to dispute it. Like he's just like, like this is kind of weird, but you know what?
Maybe,
like
look,
Go ahead,
maybe
Josh.
carriage riders can just reach 15 feet and put you into the carriages. Maybe they can just do that. That's what they do in Transylvania.
Yeah, like
No, I just love when he gets to that the people in the one carriage the humans, they're like, we will not go farther than this. And he's like, well, shit. And then I think the other carriage comes by with the fucked up guy with the like
demon knight
fingers
armor.
and the demon knight. And he just like, Keanu just stands there and he puts out his like ghoulish hand and like brings him in. And Keanu's just like, well, all right. I'm going in.
They literally just put the actor on a camera crane so that he could reach all the way over, because he reaches like 15 or 20 feet over.
Yeah.
And they were like, do we want to like build a hand and just operate it? They were like, no, let's just move the guy.
And it's a thing I don't think
guy.
they ever bring up again. Like that knight character isn't really anything.
No.
It's just this like this being that takes you to the castle, and there's something just eerie about that he never brings it up. It's just a part, I guess, of the Dracula power, the whole imagery and everything. It's
Just makes it so. I mean, so much about Keanu's goofy performance, I just feel like adds like an
he's
extra
kinda got that
level of
fish out of water
enjoyment.
face. Yeah.
Yeah. Just, I mean, him just being like chill with everything that's happening in the Dracula castle. And then at the very end where like they're eating the baby, just in that whole scene, he's finally like, dude, there was like fire and
Things
shit.
are wrong.
That was crazy, wasn't it? He's been here for like a month already.
Yeah, it took the baby sacrifice for him to realize things were not
That
right.
was the line. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I love the focus on again there's this surreal sort of gothic horror sequencing that's taking place that's very creepy and very atmospheric. Mm-hmm. And then you just have interspersed within that, you just have, and absolutely tied to it, you have the romantic opera at the heart of the story. Gary Oldman says the reason that he signed on to this film, because he actually doesn't care much for the Dracula story, but he said that he read the line, "I have crossed oceans of time to find you."
Oh, that's like my favorite line he delivers.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. So that was it. He was like, "I want to deliver that line." It's like, that is a sick line.
That's great because his delivery is spot on. He worked very hard on that line. I could tell. He's got this he turns into this anytime he is kind of getting into this this seductive or loving thing. He channels this very low and almost growly voice, but it has like a calming whisper to it as well. I don't know how he does it honestly, but it's really good. Or maybe there might be a bit of After Effects on it, maybe, but it feels pretty natural. So yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, no, and his relationship with trying to pursue Winona it's very sweet in a way, even though he's delivering moody lines like, "There's much to be learned from beasts," and he's thinking about like turning her and things like that. But then there's like this great moment where there's a split diopter conversation between the two of them, where she is, all the memories of who she might have been in a past life are kind of coming back to her. And there's a part where they double expose the part the space between the split diopter with like this V of the memories of the old Winona like diving to her death, and she literally, these memories are infecting the frame and the space between these two characters and things like that. And it's it's again style just pushing forward these emotional things that she's currently experiencing, because she's obviously having a flood of confused emotions that she's very excited to marry Keanu Reeves, but this very mysterious long-haired Prince Vlad is arising all of these things from inside her that she didn't previously know were there. Meanwhile, her friend is just turning into a vampire.
Yeah.
Poor Lucy. Poor horny Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy was just, she wanted to get married and she wanted to have sex, but, she also wanted like a gang of really handsome cowboys.
Love that fucking aspect of the story, that she's just got these 3 boys that hang around her and are all in love with her, but they're all like hanging out with each other.
Yeah.
It's like the funniest aspect of the story.
Yeah, and I do love that they end up just hanging out with Anthony Hopkins Van Helsing, who is just like this, who is this
disturber.
Yeah, he's honestly this very again, he's supposed to be sort of like the scientist vampire hunter, but he's very kind of dickish.
Yeah,
funny.
it's like he's
funny
used
too.
to all of it, so he kind of makes fun of everybody else for being so surprised by it all, which I think is pretty funny.
Yeah, and he's genuinely excited at the idea that
Yeah.
he's got like a vampire to take down, and he's just like, your Lucy is gonna turn into a demon whore from hell. And shit.
Yeah.
The devil's concubine.
There's like
He
this
also
scene,
gets one of my.
Oh no, go ahead.
Oh, go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's the scene where I forget when it is, but like Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves are like sitting down at a dinner to meet with Anthony Hopkins, and I think it is after they have already gone to the crypt to kill Lucy, and like,
Yes.
I don't know
Yeah,
if
you're right.
Winona Ryder has been like fully like informed about what's going on, or if she believes everything that's going on, but she's like, one of them is like, oh, what happened? And Anthony Hopkins is just very casually like, yeah, we cut off her head and put a stake in her heart. Like, he just says it in one breath, totally like he's like eating food at the same time, I think, and I'm like, whoa! Whoa, okay.
I think even
not only
Jonathan
that,
responds. He's just like, doctor.
yeah, he does, and not only that, the scene from the crypt, which is an incredible scene where they do
Yeah.
they shoot half of it in reverse to give Lucy
Right.
like these really creepy body movements that don't make sense. Where they basically filmed her like leaving the crypt and moving up, but then played the footage back. So all the characters are reacting to reverse footage, which is actually something that we talked about a little bit in Brian De Palma's Carrie, because he does that to get the feeling in the dream sequence at the end. But you know, they do this really graphic sequence where they hammer the fucking stake into her heart, blood gushes everywhere, they full out decapitate her, and then it is a hard cut to Anthony Hopkins cutting into the freshly cooked roast
Yes.
beef on the table.
Oh, such a good cut. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I love shit
And
like that.
Anthony Hopkins also gets one of my very favorite lines in the film. Civilization and syphilization have arisen together. Because he's giving a big speech on syphilis to all the doctors, which is obviously something that would be very important to the characters in this film, who are having a lot of sexual freedom in their experiences. But yeah, there's so many crazy detours like that, and also, you know, this is surprisingly like the most faithful adaptation of the story.
Yeah.
Like all of these strange detours where like there's captain's logs and diaries, and you know, Van Helsing gets narration where it's like, here's where I entered the picture. Like all of that shit is like from the story.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it also, again, it gives it another, you know, you're watching something so incredibly well realized in the style, but again, so, you know, modern and old timey and literary and, you know, theatrical and cinematic all at the same time. You know, it's really, you know, one of the most gorgeous movies I think that I've ever seen, and it very much serves this very erotic, violent story of a doomed romance and, you know, anger at heartbreak in this particular situation. Yeah, what's the Van Helsing enters the picture. They kill Lucy.
Yeah.
Which is obviously like
Love
a
that
really
scene, too.
huge
they get the,
sequence.
Yeah, they have like the almost exorcist blood throw
Yeah.
up instead of vomit. It's just blood all over Van Helsing, and then
Yes.
that like the decapitations in this movie are incredibly aggressive, very violent.
Very violent.
They're just right into the camera. Like I think you see like 5 different decapitations in this movie, and every single one of them has extreme detail.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins chopping all the heads of Dracula's wives and
then holding
hurling
them
their
up.
heads into the
Sending
the
them
river
down.
below.
Oh my god.
Yeah, like that image is really crazy. They actually steal an image from Black Sunday, Mario Bava, of the horse carriage through the night and through the storm.
Oh, yeah.
But not only do they do that, they turn it into a fucking like action chase sequence where
Yeah.
there's like some dudes look like Sherlock Holmes and some dudes look like cowboys, and they're literally like firing rifles and shotguns at like a carriage
By the
that is
way-
holding Dracula's body with a little piece of Transylvanian earth because he can't like leave that behind.
Right. Do we know where those guys came from? Like, were they working for Dracula in some way, or was that just kind of a like someone's trying to take our shit right now, so we have to battle
mention
back?
in dialogue that he evades them by not taking a boat the entire way and having
Right.
gypsies pick him up halfway through his trip.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So those are supposed to be Dracula's gypsies, I suppose.
Okay.
And yeah, they do a whole battle sequence with them.
Oh yeah, man! It's like just horseback too. You got people just riding off of carriages. Like some guy gets tangled up in a string, and I think they at one point they cut off the string so he's released from it and stuff. Like there's some pretty cool action beats in it that I wasn't expecting because everything else is just so like horror-esque. All the action is involved more around horror and killing in that sense. So this action beat was kind of out of nowhere, but I think it still suits what they're doing.
I mean, I just love how it's so like again, it turns into like this wintry storm where the sun is rising, so it's like all blue and white and orange as they're riding through, and it does have again precedent in like sort of like gothic horror. Which is again they literally steal the carriage chase thing from Black Sunday, which we've covered on the show, but then they turn it into this we need to hunt down and kill Dracula, and then when Gary Oldman like bursts out of that thing, he looks more monstrous than he's ever looked. He looks more like half dead bat version of himself, and they're like slitting his throat and he's bleeding everywhere. They're stabbing him in the chest and he's like freaking out. And
I was legitimately like grossed out when because eventually you get to see Ryder. She comes to his dying body, and like they have this kind of loving moment and embrace or whatever, and she does kiss him a couple times. And I will say I was kind of like, oh girl, you gotta have some strong love right there, because he's just like bleeding from the neck, and he's got his like white pale alien looking face on now, and it's just so gross, but
all the slimy textures of his hairy bat form is just so fucking gross.
There's 1,000 wrinkles on his face. It's just but the love is there.
So
the love
sweet.
is there.
Yeah, I mean that's what I think is so interesting, is that they set it up so early on, this connection between him and Winona, that you totally buy the romance even when she's like about to make out with the most disgusting thing you've ever seen in your life. You're like, don't go near that thing. And they even do like bloody squibs on his body and stuff like that from him getting shot and stuff. And like it's really crazy, what they kind of chose.
And then they do
to go with
that superimpose trick again, but instead just on his face. So it like imposes his old young face on his new old body and face, and then they do like a quick cut, and then back, and then it turns into the young self. So I thought that was another good practical effect as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do love that ultimately the big romantic gesture of this movie, this is her cutting off Gary Oldman's head.
Yeah. I know, right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that crazy? Isn't that so perverted?
Yeah.
Definitely.
That it's like, he is, she's defending this pitiful monster that she's completely in love with, and they're trying to destroy him. And all of the people trying to destroy him have this moment where they go, we've all become God's madmen, hunting this down for this centuries-old war that we have nothing to do with. Like, this guy, obviously he's doing horrible things and murdering people, but like, it's not... to the extent that we are becoming monsters, is interesting to them. And Winona ends up kind of pointing that out to them, like, will you do the same thing to me?
Yeah.
Like, there's a person in there, and I can get that person out, and she does. And he's so hideous and frail and covered in blood, and the catharsis of their love, like, breaks the curse. And the first thing he goes is he just says, fucking let me die.
Yeah.
Give me peace. Like, fucking finish this. I'm so tired.
I am over
and
this.
old and done with this shit. And so the arc of this is that she has to fall in love with him so that she can shove a sword through his heart and chop his head off. Right after kissing him.
Oh my!
And then you get the great shot of the portrait of them on the ceiling as his head is cut off on the floor.
To choir. Oh, it's so damn good.
But pivoting towards the reductive rating round, I think on Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is my third watch, and it will be my first time upgrading.
Yeah. Oh, we've all watched
to
it
the 5.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because previously I had similar issues that other people had, where it was just, sometimes, some of the performances aren't like, the most amazing you've seen in a movie like this. But as an object, I have like nothing but respect for this as a film, especially too because everyone doubted this film before it came out. people were saying that this was going to be it was dubbed another bonfire of it was dubbed the Bonfire of the Vampires, a reference to the Bonfire of the Vanities, which was Brian De Palma's like really, really huge bomb of a movie that he had in 1990. Instead, this movie was well reviewed. Instead, this movie ended up making money for Coppola. And I think it is all because of, the amount of very clear effort that went into this. They drafted like 1,000 storyboards.
I mean, the effects team didn't even believe in it. They were like, we can't do this. Like the first effects team.
Yeah. And in order to find an effects artist who would actually commit to what he wanted to do, he had to hire his fucking son. Roman Coppola was the VFX person for this because he was he couldn't find
talent.
a VFX artist outside of family who would
That's
who
nuts.
would like just agree to go fucking crazy with him because they were like, dude, you don't have to put all this effort into it. There are other ways that you can do this. And he was like, no. I want weird shit. I want, that's apparently a quote from him that he gave all of his designers. He says, give me everything Catholic and 19th century that you can fucking find that you think is weird and scary.
Yes.
And I want to fucking see it. And yeah, again, the movie, the way that services this movie that deals in the fear of sex and of desire and lost love and lost time and this sort of like painful, eternal, hellish existence of this lonely Dracula figure looking for catharsis and escape, which is just death, which is very, nihilistic. Somehow it's a very nihilistic end result, but you feel romantic about it.
Yeah.
And he's willing to tear limb from limb to find what he lost. And the film is just a technical marvel. Everything about the look, I think, drives home the operatic unreality of it. And that all, once again, stems from character. It stems from Dracula's own godless, broken heart and makes the entire world scary and surreal and erotic and destructive all at once. And yeah, for me, this is one of the best looking movies ever.
Yes.
And a huge achievement that deserves to stand up there with Coppola's other masterpieces, in my opinion. So
that's
5.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, even if some of the, performances and then maybe some of the more, over the top aspects of it don't quite do it for you, you cannot take away the fact that this is one of the most gorgeous films ever made.
Yes.
It's incredible looking. I can't believe every single shot has such an attention to detail, and they're using so many different effects all at the same time in such a great way. And the way that those effects eventually end up expressing like Dracula's power, his loss of love,
feelings,
his revenge, like all of it is incredible. And honestly, like I am going to give it still like a high 4. Like, it's a very, very strong 4. Although I will say, I feel like all my hang-ups are just stupid now. Like, I don't even want to even express them, but I guess I'm still dealing with them a little bit. But it's, I don't know. I can't take away the skill that is involved in this film. It's unbelievable storytelling. And, I think, like, even though we were talking about Keanu with the kind of odd performance it gives, it does have an element more so of that fish out of water thing. So when he is kind of confused and doing his Keanu thing, I think it still works in an odd way. I'm still very entertained, and I'm never taken out of the story when he's in it or anything like that. It's just, I guess I get a little bit why people are hung up on that, but I don't know. He's really only in it for like 10 minutes, it seems.
That's just it. On rewatches for me, I'm always surprised at how little of the movie has Keanu in it. It's literally like 30 or 40 minutes of this over 2-hour movie.
And I think that's because so many people talk about his performance as this like big thing in the movie. And when me and my brother rewatched it last night, we were kind of like, oh yeah, Keanu is almost barely in this. So
the plot literally gets rid of him for like the middle hour of the movie.
So to hang up your like dislike of the movie based on just that is definitely silly, because it's barely any of the movie. But yeah, that being said, high 4 for now. Maybe I just need a few more watches, which I will be doing over the years because I love this thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I am also
Brianna?
going to give it a high 4, like a 4.5. It definitely, like, I love it. I think it just kind of like, I feel like what takes me out of it maybe is I feel like it like drags a little bit and I kind of like, and is a little bit like
that.
slow for me in parts, in a way where I can't like fully get into it and give it a perfect score, 5.5, but I still like absolutely fucking love this movie. And to your point about Keanu like not being in it a lot, I've seen it, this is my third time seeing it like you guys, and I had to like Wikipedia whether he dies at the beginning. I was like, does he ever come back actually? Like I could not remember because he is just in it such an insignificant amount. But yeah, no, his performance is just like, I definitely like, I can't remember the first time I watched this, but I remember being actively pissed off by his performance when I first watched it. And I had no idea, I guess, the like culture around this movie or like the conversation back then when I had first watched it. And I was like, damn, this fucking sucks. And like, I thought Winona Ryder, I also do not think is very good in the movie. Like, I find
I've seen a lot of that too, where that Winona, I think, dodged a lot by just being slightly better than Keanu.
Yeah. She's definitely what slightly better, but she was also like similarly not good, and kind of goofy. But again, like it doesn't detract from me at all at this point. I want to give two little shout outs here. One to the MVP Tom Waits in his role as Renfield.
We forgot Tom Waits.
Fucking Waits, who literally gives a better British accent performance than like either of the two leads. I thought that was very funny. He is so good.
I love the way he's shot too, with those like high angles and just very weird madhouse institution.
Wide angles of him in the asylum, and which is just covered in like blood and dirt.
Yeah, and those guys in like a box cage.
Bugs.
The boxes on their heads, I guess, to protect them from the insane people.
Oh my God.
So funny. But then I also, another thing that I learned, that I then was like paying attention to in this watch, what I learned from a YouTube video that I watched couple months ago, was that the like costume designer, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Eiko Ishioka. She's a Japanese costume designer, and they like talked about her in the movie or in the video that I watched. She did like I'm looking at her IMDb. She did The Fall.
She did Mishima.
Yeah, she did. She's uncredited with Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. She did Dracula. She did The Cell. She did The Fall. But they just like talked about her costuming, and like that's why I noticed. I had never noticed it before. Yeah, but she like she did like his robe, which if you like notice does look like very Eastern inspired. I had like never noticed it, but I think they talked about how they just kind of let her do whatever she wanted. Like he didn't really have like I think like much of a I don't know, like guide for her, I guess, but
no, they told her to keep it 19th century, but beyond that, they just said don't do like the cape. They said don't do the cape and don't do like the standard shit that you've seen in like every Dracula, like a cheap Dracula costume.
I love how she's like, I'll give you a cape.
It's like, and I was like looking at it this time because I'd never noticed it before, but it is very like Eastern looking, the way it's like made and the designs on it as well, which is just like, fucking rules.
Yeah, the filmmaking on display here can't really be understated. I think that this is, in terms of like what Coppola and his team did, I think this is one of the most beautiful movies on like every level. Like it's not just the in-camera effects, the production design, the costumes, everything, the way that it all creates this, again, because that just adds to the weird timelessness of it. It's like, where the fuck are we? What culture is this? You know? And I think that, you know, again, this is a type of movie making that was on its deathbed by the 1990, and this just kind of stands up as a last representative. This movie basically just died a beautiful death for that kind of movie making.
Then they cut the fucking
same way
head
that
off.
Dracula dies.
They cut it off.
And he got to do Hammer horror. He got to do like Universal horror. He got to do like Gothic 60s stuff, and he turned it all into this extremely erotic, bloody opera with bleeding castles and hellfire skies and horny monsters who express their love by tearing people limb from limb, and you can't beat that in terms of genre fare. I don't think so. So everything about that was previously questionable for me on previous watches is just, it disappears into the background every single time for me. I just get into all the batshit sensual psychedelic bloodlust stuff, and I'm like, incredible.
And it's getting harder and harder to even express why I don't 5 it. So it might get there.
One of the few movies that deserves the name Phantasmagoric. 'Cause it gets overused, I think, but one of the movies that actually earns that for sure. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for, I think, this week's episode. That was Daughters of Darkness from 1971 and Dracula from 1992. Thanks so much, Brianna, for joining us and for bringing these films with you. No problem. If you've got anything to plug briefly, this is where we have you do that.
The only things that I have to plug were basically already mentioned, but follow me on Twitter at JustBreeZigs and subscribe to my newsletter, That's Weird, at briannazigler.substack.
Awesome.
Hell yeah. Can definitely recommend doing that. All right. For our listeners, in 1 week's time, we are going to be back continuing Spooktober here and bouncing off sort of Brianna's double feature here. We are going to be talking about vampires.
Yes.
Once again, we're going to be plugging in an episode that I've had kind of slotted in for like a year or two, but just haven't got around to doing yet. And it made sense to follow up this discussion on vampires with an episode on Near Dark, 1987, Catherine Bigelow. Her sort of a Western vampire movie hybrid that has a lot of style and romance to it in a way that, you know, kind of reminds you of Dracula. And then we're going to be talking about Vampires from 1998, directed by John Carpenter, one of the last sort of bigger budget films that he got to do, even though his budget was slashed in the making of it. And has James Woods with a leather jacket and a crossbow
and some
hunting
of the
down
best
vampires
dialogue ever.
And calling them like dickheads while he does it.
I can't wait. It's so fun.
So that's what we're going to be talking about in 1 week's time. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to have a special guest, friend of the pod and artist of the pod, Trevor Henderson.
Awesome.
He's returning. And he is going to be bringing with him a double feature of two films I hadn't even heard of.
I love it.
And so we are going to be talking about one, The Midnight Hour,
okay,
which I believe is from 1985, and then a movie called Lady in White, which I believe is another late 80s
Mysterious.
film. And I gave him the carte blanche to just pick anything as long as some of the I had him pick what he thought were kind of like underrated Halloween spooky kind of vibes.
Okay.
What gets him into the season kind of stuff, and that was what he picked.
Awesome.
And sometimes it's nice to not know what the hell we're talking about.
Hopefully we can get our hands on them.
Yes. So that's what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time with a special guest, and might as well throw the third one in there as well for the Halloween episode, the wrap up to Spooktober this year on the night before Halloween. You guys are going to be getting the episode that you guys voted for, Phantasm and Phenomena.
Awesome.
By Dario Argento, which is going to be a lot of fun. As well. So that's what you can expect.
Is the fusion there just because they start with PHs? That's got to be it.
Do you know what? I'm not sure because I have not seen Phenomena yet, but it very well could be. I've seen Phantasm, though, and I like Phantasm. Phantasm's got some crazy stuff in it.
Yeah, I watched Phantasm a few years back before the show has even started, and I remember really liking it. But it was also before I really understood these films more so. So I'm looking forward to the rewatch.
And when's this episode coming out? This is when are you guys listening to this? Oh yeah. So also, if any of you are listening to this, our virtual screening, the free one that we're doing for all listeners, is going to be on October 14th.
Yes.
At 10 p.m. Eastern time, and we're going to be watching Lucio Fulci's Zombie 3.
Hell yeah.
Movie that none of us have seen, but Lucio Fulci, always fun to watch with a crowd, always disgusting.
Yep.
So if that interests you at all, October 14th, anyone who's listening to this, patron or not, everyone is invited. You can find the link over on the Patreon. And you can also probably find it on the Twitter and everything. I've already tweeted it out and everything as well. So come join us. And if you're a patron, you also get another one on October 28th.
Yeah.
Where we're going to be watching a vampire movie again. Grave of the Vampire, one from the 70s I haven't seen.
Awesome.
But I've heard is cool. So look forward to all that. Lots of spooky stuff. But yeah, I think that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy.